Have you ever noticed how the places that broke you keep calling you back? Not to wound you again, but to awaken something deeper within you? Carl Jung believed that the soul is drawn to the very wounds that shaped it, because that's where consciousness wants to grow. What feels like tragedy is often the soil of transformation. What once shattered, you can later become the place you bring light to. Welcome to Carl Jung's Legacy. In today's video, we'll explore why your deepest pain is not a detour, but the very path your soul chose to evolve. Jung taught that true healing isn't about escaping the darkness, but illuminating it from within. Let's begin. 1. The wound is not the end. It is the doorway to consciousness, Carl Jung once wrote. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. He understood that suffering is not merely a cruel accident of life. It is an initiation. The moments that bring you to your knees are not punishments. They are passages. Every great transformation begins with something breaking, something falling apart, something refusing to work as it once did. The ego calls it failure. The soul calls it awakening. Pain is the psyche's way of forcing awareness. When life moves smoothly, we remain asleep within our habits, our masks, our illusions of control. But when we are wounded by loss, rejection, betrayal, or collapse, the unconscious seizes the opportunity to make itself known. The pain that floods in is not just emotional, it is symbolic. It is the call of the deeper self demanding to be heard, saying, "You cannot live like this anymore. You must see what you've refused to see." From a Jungian perspective, what breaks us is never random. Each wound corresponds to a part of the psyche that has been neglected, denied, or repressed. The very event that shatters you also exposes the doorway to the part of you that was waiting to emerge. The relationship that ended reveals the dependency you needed to outgrow. The failure that humiliated you reveals where your identity was built on approval. The loss that devastated you reveals the attachments that kept you from true freedom. In this way, pain is not the destroyer, it is the revealer. Most of us resist this truth because pain feels unbearable when it first arrives. The ego's instinct is to escape, to numb, to rebuild the old life as quickly as possible. Yet the unconscious is patient. It will not let you go back to sleep. The more you run, the louder the symptoms become: anxiety, emptiness, apathy, or restlessness. These are not illnesses in themselves. They are messages from the soul saying, "There is something here you must face." The wound becomes the doorway because it dissolves illusion. It strips away what is inauthentic, the identities, beliefs, and attachments that once protected you, but now imprison you. When you lose what you thought you needed, you are forced to encounter what you truly are. Jung saw this moment as sacred, the confrontation between the ego and the self. It is where consciousness expands because for the first time, you are no longer living as the image of yourself. You are meeting your own depth. To see pain in this way is to transform its meaning. You no longer ask, "Why did this happen to me?" but "What is this trying to awaken in me?" The wound stops being a curse and becomes a teacher. It is not there to break you apart, but to break you open, so that light can enter the places you've kept hidden, and awareness can grow where once there was only survival. Pain does not end you. It invites you, and if you can stay with it, without fleeing or numbing, it becomes what it was always meant to be, the threshold between who you were and who you are becoming. 2. The place where you were wounded is the place where light is trying to enter. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious is not simply a dark void filled with chaos. It is the treasury of everything we have rejected, feared, or forgotten within ourselves. It holds the shadow, our shame, our guilt, our anger, our loneliness, and all the unlived possibilities we once buried to survive. The wound, then, is not just an external event. It is the gateway into this hidden territory of the soul. What we call suffering is often the psyche's attempt to bring these lost parts back into the light. When life breaks you open, what's really happening is that consciousness is expanding. The pain you feel is the light pressing against the walls of your unconscious, trying to reach what has been exiled. Every time you feel exposed, humiliated, or shattered, a forgotten part of your being is calling for recognition. It's as if the soul whispers, "Come back for me. Stop abandoning me in the dark." The light doesn't enter by avoiding the wound, it enters through it. To turn toward your pain is to stop being a victim of it. The moment you dare to face what hurts, you shift from the one who suffers to the one who witnesses. You begin to hold your own darkness with awareness rather than fear. This act of turning inward is not weakness, it is courage of the highest order. It is easier to keep running, to keep performing strength, than to sit quietly with the parts of yourself you have judged unworthy of love. Yet only when you face them can they transform. Jung believed that everything we reject about ourselves becomes autonomous in the unconscious. The shadow doesn't disappear, it waits. It appears in projections, in emotional reactions, in dreams. It manifests as the other who triggers us, or the enemy we cannot forgive. The shadow seeks only one thing, to be seen. And when you bring the light of awareness to it, not judgment, not denial, but understanding, it stops sabotaging your life from below. It becomes integrated, transformed into creative and spiritual power. This is why healing always feels paradoxical. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like breaking open. You don't rise above the darkness. You descend into it with compassion. You sit with your fear until you realize it's protecting something tender. You touch your shame until it reveals its origin in innocence. You face your loneliness until you find the child who once needed to be held. Each time you do, the light grows, not because the darkness is gone, but because it has been understood. True light does not come from avoiding the shadow or pretending it isn't there. It comes from walking into it consciously, carrying awareness like a torch. The more willing you are to enter your pain, the less control it has over you. You become not the victim of the wound, but its healer, the one who brings illumination to the forgotten places of your soul. In that sacred encounter, light and darkness are no longer enemies. They become the two hands of the same awakening. 3. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means understanding the meaning of the wound. Carl Jung believed that the soul matures not through perfection, but through meaning. And meaning is born from suffering that has been consciously understood. He wrote that the soul becomes whole only when it learns the language of symbols. And among all the symbols that life offers, the wound is perhaps the most sacred. It is the place where the human and the divine meet, where pain transforms into wisdom and despair becomes insight. When you are caught in pain, the natural impulse is to ask, "Why did this happen to me?" That question keeps you bound to the story of the victim, circling the event again and again in search of logic or fairness. But the psyche doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in symbols. The deeper question is not why something happened, but what it means. The moment you shift from blame to understanding, from resistance to reflection, your relationship with the wound changes. It no longer defines you. It begins to reveal you. Every wound, when viewed symbolically, carries a message from the unconscious. Betrayal might teach you discernment. Abandonment may lead you towards self-reliance. Loss can open you to compassion. Even humiliation can show you where your ego was built on fragile ground. Jung would say that the wound becomes your teacher when you stop running from it and start listening to it. The question, "What is this asking me to see?" turns pain into revelation. To see your suffering in this way does not mean denying it. It means giving it purpose. The past no longer becomes a prison, but a passage. The event itself may remain unchangeable, but its meaning evolves as your consciousness does. Healing, then, is not forgetting. It is remembering differently. It is seeing the same pain through wiser eyes. When you find meaning in your wound, you reclaim power from it. What once felt senseless becomes part of your spiritual architecture. You begin to understand that your suffering was never meant to destroy you, but to dismantle the illusions that kept you unconscious. The question shifts from, "How do I erase this?" to "How can I carry this with grace?" In that understanding, the wound becomes sacred. It transforms from a scar into a symbol, a living reminder of your own evolution. You stop identifying with the pain and begin identifying with the awareness that grew from it. The energy that once fueled despair now fuels compassion. The darkness that once blinded you now sharpens your vision. Jung saw this as the essence of individuation, to bring light to the very place that once held darkness. When you give your suffering meaning, it stops being an obstacle to your path. It becomes the path itself. The wound, no longer a source of shame, becomes your greatest source of wisdom. The place where the human heart discovers its divine capacity to understand, to forgive, and to love again. 4. The light you bring to the world comes from the darkness. You've Made Peace with Carl Jung often reminded us that no one becomes truly whole by avoiding the darkness within. Wholeness, he said, comes from integration, from reconciling the opposites that live inside the human soul. You cannot guide anyone out of their own shadows if you have never faced your own. The light that has never met darkness is not compassion, it is naivety. True light is born from descent, from the quiet courage of one who has walked through pain and returned carrying wisdom instead of bitterness. The journey through darkness changes the quality of your presence. When you've faced your own fears, shame, or grief, you no longer need to judge or fix others. You can simply be with them. People feel your calm not because you have all the answers, but because you are no longer afraid of not having them. You embody light not by preaching it, but by radiating it through your understanding. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation. The process of becoming fully yourself, uniting shadow and light into one living truth. The more deeply you embrace your rejected parts, the more luminous you become. Each fear you face becomes a lantern. Each sorrow you've transformed becomes a bridge for someone else. When you no longer hide your own wounds, your very being becomes a sanctuary for others to begin healing. Jung believed this is how consciousness expands, not by denying suffering, but by redeeming it through awareness. Every time a human being turns inward, makes peace with their shadow, and chooses compassion over avoidance, the collective light of humanity grows a little brighter. Integration does not mean that darkness disappears. It means that darkness loses its power to control you. The parts of yourself you once feared, your anger, your doubt, your fragility, no longer work against you. They now serve your growth. In this harmony of opposites, your life stops being a struggle between who you should be and who you really are. You become an instrument of balance, a bridge between chaos and clarity, between pain and peace. This is the ultimate meaning of the wound. Not to break you, but to open you into love so wide that it includes both light and shadow. From that place, you no longer need to save the world. Your very presence begins to heal it. You become a quiet reminder that the human soul can endure the fire and still come out shining. And that is what Jung called individuation, the birth of a self that has walked through its own night and can now carry light into the darkness of the world. Thank you for watching and for walking this path of awareness with me. If this message resonated with your own journey, don't forget to follow Carl Jung's legacy for more reflections on healing, transformation, and the art of becoming whole. Remember, the light you carry was forged in the darkness you survived. Take care of your soul, and I'll see you in the next video.